Welcome to Pearls on a Pig podcast with Charlotte and Dolly, where we uncover everything you should know about Vegas philanthropy. Let's head to the studio now and see what we've unpacked in this episode. Hey, Charlotte, how's it going?
Dolly, it's been an interesting week. It has. And with the school being out now, we got a lot of people in the community who have some idle time on their hands. So we're hoping that they're listening to our podcast so they can get some inside information.
I bet it has, yeah, especially those that are going to go out this summer and want to volunteer or do big things in the community and hope they're making an impact. We definitely want to let them know where to go and which ones to avoid.
Absolutely. Talking about ones to, I don't want to say avoid, but keep an eye out. You know, we have these big organizations here in town, and there's one that's just considered like the hub of the community. However, I don't see much from the hub, right? Like, they don't provide direct services. They say they advocate, they're taking donations, but I don't see how that works for the community at whole, right?
Is this someone that takes monetary donations or a product or?
Yeah, they take it all. They take monetary donations, they take product, they call themselves cascading it down to other nonprofits as their partners. They do provide grant funds to other nonprofits once a year, but when you look at the list, a lot of the nonprofits are the same ones over and over. So you kind of wonder how that gets, looked at and where the fairness is, especially with some grassroots nonprofits that are really putting in the work and needing the work, but they're not getting the help from this so-called community hub. So where's the accountability on that piece?
So I think I have an idea of what you're talking about because this is probably a national organization that's rooted here in Las Vegas. But the one that when you partner with them or become a recipient of any of their money or donations, the requirement is you have a sign in your business window, a partner. So interesting, because they do have a very large presence here in Las Vegas. I know they facilitate a lot of volunteer movement. That's their big thing, is their big, give back days or whatever they do. Nonprofits moving throughout the valley to do the work.
Absolutely. You know, facilitating volunteer work is always needed, right? All nonprofits need the help. But which nonprofits are utilising this kind of partnership on the volunteer side? And again, is it the same nonprofits that are getting the grant funding? And where's the reach out? And is it just the one day that you're really just going out for a bang? Or are you actively looking to help these nonprofits grow? I have not seen or noticed any active work for helping these nonprofits grow. It's just when you look at the nonprofits that they consistently have partnered with, they're other larger nonprofits with a large following. So then that makes me wonder, are we just trying to get some, social media likes? And, again, going back to the popularity contest, what are we really doing? Are you really advocating for the community as the community hub?
Yeah, and is there any impact really happening here, or is this all for show? I think, when we talk about the part about where there's these larger ones that they're doing the give back to, and they're the same ones year over year or month over month, you're right. It's always the ones with the big public image, the most recognizable logo or name. And the top of the list is always like hunger relief and organizations that can move large quantities of food. But in reality, they literally move zero food. They're supposed to be giving it to other nonprofits, but, it's at a cost. When you're charging other nonprofits to do their mission is terrible. But there's one here that's very well known, and you see their campaigns all over TV. They got a very large budget. I mean, in the millions. They've also got a CEO making $475,000 a year.
$475,000 a year to run an organization that has a massive budget. What are you saying? Like tens of millions of dollars?
Yeah, I'm saying in the millions dollars, $50 million range.
Okay, and no direct services. So really no direct impact other than charging. I'm just, charging the nonprofits that you so-called partner with for them to provide the impact. Is that what I'm hearing? That's interesting.
Yeah, yeah. So let me break it down a little bit further because it gets better as it goes on down. So this is an organization that's very visible and who has very strong partnerships with, your grocery stores to rescue food. In return, the model was supposed to be or should be and is presented to the public that they disperse this food to other nonprofits in the community that support hunger relief. The reality is that's not what happens. As a nonprofit that wants to receive this organization's services or product, there's a fee. But there's also the component of if you work with us, you then have to report how many people you served through your organization to us. And then what they do in turn is, I like to call it double dipping because I really feel that's what it is. But then they report out to the community and their donors, this is how many people and families we served. You served zero. Your partner agency that you charged for that product did all the serving. Right. So there's that piece.
That sounds like the community hub that I'm talking about. So they get the numbers from the nonprofits that they provide funding to, or even volunteer hours to, take those numbers and then report them as this is who we've served, this is who we've helped. And it's like, but you didn't physically help them. Like you didn't. You didn't do the groundwork, right? And I'm even more baffled. I understand that initially, way back, when I did a deep dive into the start of this organisation, what the initial premise was, right? But as it has evolved over the decades, their model it's obsolete. Because I'm baffled by the fact that donors are giving money to this organisation when they can give it directly to the organisation that they're going to give it to. Why do we need a middleman? What's the purpose of the middleman?
You bring up a really good point about that because I think if donors really knew the inner workings of this and could see past the big campaigns and television ads and, my God, we're the face of the community and we do this and we do that. I think if the donor actually saw there was no impact actually being made, there'd be a very different take on the way this organization would work. And then the little ones that are actually doing the work and could use the funding, I think the donor would be so surprised to see how much impact they actually can make with their dollars. This is about one who has a campaign where, if you got some spare change in your pocket and you donated it, it can buy, 3 meals or something like that. And in my brain, I think of my meals as breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Those are meals. Last time I've ever been able to buy a whole meal for $1, even $2.
Yes, spare change. Yeah, you can't even get that at a fast food value menu, right? Like, what are we doing? I mean, I remember spare change being able to buy me a gallon of gas back in 1991.
I don't think we've been able to do that for the last 15 years. Yeah, same.
Right. So, how are they able to keep up with inflation? How does that campaign translate? Right. And so I think, again, because we talked about it last week in our podcast, that the due diligence of the community holding these organizations accountable to be really truthful. And I feel like we get gaslit.
Do you think it's a lot because these, say, corporate donors that want to work with a nonprofit, then they just flip through the one that pops up top on the Google search bar, right? Because they get the most recognition. So is it really about impact or is it about, hey, look at us, we're on TV doing good. Yay, we pack some meals.
I see it as them using these organizations with the big following as kind of like an advertisement, right? Like you said, I'm doing well, but look what I'm doing for the community. But that's going to reach out to, I don't know, the 50, 100, 200,000 followers that they got. So all it does is bring business to the corporations. So are you really trying to do good? And I'm sorry, your employee resource groups, you guys, want to volunteer once a month and that's your thing. But for me, it's like, do you have to have an employee resource group to go out and do something to plan that? Can you not just be a genuinely great person to say, hey, I want to volunteer. This is my organization. And I feel like those employee resource groups, again, choose the biggest nonprofits to go to say, this is what we're doing. And it's like, no. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's because they've been misled though, right? Like they're like, "Oh my gosh, look at the impact this organization's making. So if we go help them, this is great impact and great exposure." At the end of the day, you've made zero impact because this organization is not a direct service provider at all. Not one family can walk in there and get services. Not one.
Right. And so the research I was doing on the other nonprofit was they hold an expo to help individuals in the community, get some bills paid, things of that nature. But the majority of that is again funded by a corporate foundation. And so they're being used as a middleman to facilitate that process, right? So again, why do we need that middle person? What's their goal here? And when I read articles and watch the news and things like that, it's always, the executive team talking about the impact. But I don't see you anywhere else supporting the community. I don't see you at, I don't know, let's say for instance, it's Pride Month this month. Will they partake in a Pride parade? Will they partake in the MLK parade? Will they partake in, I don't know, the rodeo parade? It's just, where are you in the community? What are you doing? You're only partnering with corporations because you're only looking at those, 50, 25, $100,000 donations to give. But then I think the other part too is, are these organizations that get this funding, are they even aware of who's donating so then they can reach out? No, they're holding it close to their chest.
When you talk about the middleman, right? And so these big corporations are giving to this particular organization and this hub in an effort thinking what? That the expectation was that this hub did all the back end research, did their due diligence, knows that the organizations that they're going to trickle the money down to are legit and on the up and up. And then that's the expectation. Is that why the corporate companies are doing this middleman so they don't actually have to do the work?
Mm-hmm.
The other side of that, I almost want to say it's sheer laziness, right? You truly don't want to know what's going on. You just want to do the check, drop, and run, right? Drop the check, hope we made an impact, yay us. Give us a report on how our dollars were. We'll send that down to our staff that work in this corporate company. And then the hub goes, yay, we've got a future donor down the road, right? Like I feel like the hub is building their own database, right, at the same time. And then the expectation of the corporate company that's giving this money to the hub is that, hey, did you vet these nonprofits that we're giving to? Because then who's at fault when they give it to a nonprofit who's doing bad things, you know?
Right. Who's gone awry? Yeah. I mean, we talked about that last week with one nonprofit. And then there was another one that was in the news that had a 10 series expose done on them, right? And so who's really doing the due diligence? You're just reading these applications and saying, the mission sounds good. They have this big budget so they can utilize the money. But then are these budgets really, what's the word I'm looking for? Do they really show the growth in the programs? Like, what are we doing here? Or is it just a one and done program? Because we've seen that also where you have a corporate donor give to an organization hundreds of thousands of dollars, and then that particular program just disappeared. Nothing happened with it.
Love that you just brought that up because I got to tell you a sidebar story here. So there's right, sidebars are great just because I recently heard of an organization here in town and I'm still doing my deep dive on them because this is an ongoing thing. But so far from what I've learned is there was a very large healthcare company that backed a program again for hunger relief, right?
I love a sidebar.
And this particular donor gives this money to build this fabulous hunger relief place program. And this program gets put into a local school. And then they do a big grand opening ceremony or ribbon cutting with all, politicians and everybody, the news, the media comes out and does this grand old bit, ribbon cutting. And then 4 months later, there's no store anymore at that school. It never opened past the ribbon cutting ceremony. So all these families that thought they were going to be able to go get food for free, and it was so great because it was right on the school campus, and teachers that needed extra support for food in their household, it was going to be available to them. And then imagine going there and lights are off and there's no food in this building. And the donor gave $600,000 for this program. Gone.
Oh my God. Speechless.
But then you know what kills me? The same donor, the same organization, do it again in another school after the first one failed. Right? So it's like, how many times you got to be hit in the head before you, donor, before you realize that your money is going nowhere?
My God, that's wild.
And it's not even, and you want to know, I mean, like, think about where's the money coming from originally that this donor gave, right? Is that the employees donating to the fund to help? Somebody's out money. The corporation's money was not just seed money. This was someone gave this money to support their philanthropic efforts. So all those people, right? So all those people are out too. And what a letdown.
They had to raise that money, right?
Nonprofits still in the headlines for doing the best work in the community.
Huge disappointment. And that's the other thing too, the fact that they can stay in the limelight with all of this behind them. And for me, it's like, do you genuinely care? Or is this just another vanity project for you to say that you are a good person? But then, I see some nonprofits and I always question the leadership. When you look in, they're constantly hiring for the same position over and over again. It's like, what is happening? What's going on? Why can't you keep this position in place? Apparently, it's a leadership issue. There's no clear direction happening because there's no way the same position should be posted or shared or whatever.
Right.
Literally every 6 to 9 months, it's the same position. So what's really happening?
Yeah.
Again, we go back to the trust factor.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, I think this goes back to that whole what's really going on internally with these organizations, the NPOs. But then again, what's really going on in corporate America with your philanthropic side and your corporate social responsibility, right? Who's overseeing that? Do they even know? Do they have qualifications on how to read the 990s or even just basic information on a nonprofit? Have you even just looked at the news? I mean, you just talked about, I'm really curious. I hope we do a deep dive next week into that organization, but you talked about that 10 episode expose. Girl, I want to know more because I'm hoping the end result is that there was some resolve and that company's no longer here. I mean, I can't wait till we talk about that one.
Apparently, it was an organization who has been in this town for well over 40 years, maybe pushing 50. And under the new leadership, from what I understood, was this whole neglect of recipients receiving care, getting out of a dire situation, and then ending up in a shelter that is run down, roaches, no food, physical fighting, sexual assault, like all of these things. And under the leadership, it was ignored. It was not addressed. And the fact that during this expose, leadership was questioned and it was just plain as day, pure, just the pure cadence of what she was told to say by PR. I felt like there was no remorse into what was happening under her leadership. And to take it further, the fact that I believe she's still running this organization, that the board did not remove her, because it's a huge exposition on the organization, the leadership and the board, right? You're exposing this organization to the fact that they really don't care. They're just now getting money to say that they're doing the work, which they have done some work. But when you look at this expose, it's like, where's the humanity and the empathy for these people that you say you are here to help? And I did not see that in the expose.
That's so sad. We are almost out of time, but I swear we need to add that to our list for next week because I want to do a little bit deeper dive and share with our audience where they can find the same stuff that we're finding. We should let them see exactly what we're talking about. So let's, without publicly sharing their names and stuff, but happy to provide the links to these exposés once we talk about them, because I think that's a real eye opener, especially when you're talking about somewhere that's supposed to be a safe place for people or families or women and children to go. And it turns out being worse than the environment that they were in originally, right? Crazy. Super. Well, we're about out of time for this week, so
Yeah, it's so disappointing. All right, Dolly. Well, until next week, we hope our listeners are tuning in and please like, share, comment, send us an email.
yeah, if you want to see something listen to us on the next podcast with a subject we haven't touched on yet, send us an email. We'll be happy to look into that and share our findings.
Have a good one, Dolly.
You too, Charlotte. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Pearls on a Pig podcast with Charlotte and Dolly. If you want to reach out to us with suggestions for a topic on a future episode, drop us an email at pearlsonapigpodcast@gmail.com.